about it is how on earth do you do it affordably? So really for me, it has been making some mistakes, doing things the wrong way, and just learning through experience. So hopefully this video will help you benefit from some of my experience. When it comes to a trip, there are two usually biggest ticket items, accommodation and flights. So in today's little tutorial, we're going to talk about my tips and tricks for flights. Now this is not brain science at all. I find it to be, it's just based on my experience, and it's really based on my preferences. So I think really it boils down to find a flight engine that works really well for you. I have two favorites. One that I use for 90% of my flight searching needs, and then another that I maybe use for a really particular purpose, which we'll go over in a second. So my favorite is Google Flights. I like them because they have because of their calendar feature, which I'll go through in just a second. I find it fairly easy to navigate, and that's essentially the only reason. So a couple of mentalities you want to keep in mind as you're looking for a flight. The number one rule is the more flexible you can be, the more money you have the opportunity to save. Flights can vary as much for a transatlantic flight as much as $300 round trip, but just by choosing the different days you travel. It can vary even more than that, especially the closer in a trip gets. So if you are able to not have a particular date in mind, it can be hugely, hugely helpful. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. We're going to do a flight search for a trip that I actually hope to take personally. I would love to go to Paris this spring. So when I travel, I like to go abroad for about a month or so. And you can even just see here as we're starting to look at flights, this is why I love Google Flights so much, because if you can focus in on these little amounts below the numbers, those are the rough prices. As you select particular ones, it's going to give you it's going to recalculate. But let's say you can see here, if I wanted to fly Monday the 14th, it's $1,000. If I was willing to wait until Saturday, it's $754. So you can see the day that you fly makes a big difference. Again, like I said, I'm probably looking at sometime in April. Sometimes you have to click a start date in order to see the rest populate, but let's say I clicked on the 10th. And actually, I'm going to click on the 1st. So even though it said the number like 700 or something like that, you can see, I don't know if you saw what it was before, but this is about the 10th time I've attempted to record this, so I know that if I looked at an April 1st to May 2nd date, I was looking at about 543. So sometimes in the calendar, you do want to actually click in order to see updated amounts. So once you click on a departure date, all the amounts for return dates will be accurate. So I am going to go ahead and click on this $543 ticket, and if you think about it, $543 from Minneapolis to Paris round trip is really not too bad. Of course, you always want to look at the details just to make sure you're not having 1,500 stopovers and lots and lots of travel time. One stop in Reykjavik, Keflavik International Airport is great, and 10 hours is wonderful for a flight. And then coming back, that looks okay too. So it's a good, travel times are all nice and reasonable. I like, especially when you're leaving, like I've actually taken this flight from Paris to Minneapolis before, and leaving at 2 p.m. departure time is really nice. And I'm getting back here by 6. So that looks really good. That's definitely the one that I would choose. I talked about flexibility, so obviously flexibility in dates matters. Another thing is just another way that you can save money is just to try different options, just to try different things. So one thing I'll suggest to people sometimes is to look at 2 one-way tickets. Just to take a step back, my general rule of thumb for a flight over to Europe is that I think maybe once in the recent past have I paid more than $800 cumulative for a total round trip ticket, and that's actually really expensive. Generally, I want to keep it under 600, under 500 if I can at all help it. Even if that means kind of Frankensteining a trip together, putting it together in pieces and I'm coordinating. We'll go through that in a second. But sometimes if I got lucky this time during my dates, the price was nice and reasonable, but let's say it's a little higher and that wasn't a good option, something you can always consider doing is looking at it in 2 one-way tickets. So Minneapolis to Paris. And this is nice because you can see, like, within the next 6 weeks, the prices are all in the $500 range for a one-way. But as of February, you get down to $300, which is really fantastic. And you click onto it again just to make sure that it is what you wanted. This is not exactly ideal. You've got 2 stops, which I never loved doing. Got a somewhat, it's not a terribly long layover, and in fact, I don't really mind a 4-hour layover when you're going internationally. So I would probably book this one for that amount of price if my alternative that I was seeing was super high. But you can kind of click in. You always want to click into a low price just to make sure that it's a real low price and not something that you just would be unwilling to do. With Google Flights, you can, of course, sort it by number of stopovers, total travel time, etc. Now, another option as you're looking at flexibility that you can always do is fly out of or into a really big hub airport. So the U.S., I would say probably Atlanta, New York, somewhat Boston. If you're going to Europe, they tend to have somewhat cheap flights. Chicago, and maybe LAX. LAX particularly if you're going to Asia, but sometimes it can be cheaper if you say that that's your origin. So let's say I wanted to do Chicago to Paris. And then what I will do, coming from Minneapolis, is I will buy a ticket from Minneapolis to Chicago separately. This can be a great option. It can absolutely save you money. Sometimes big airlines like WOW Air, which is a great transatlantic discount airline, they obviously offer it only out of particular airports, so that can definitely save you some money. It does add a bit of complexity, and you're also taking on the burden in case you're delayed. So. And you can sense that when you're traveling, this is always what it's about. It's saying you can save money, but you have to be willing to accept these realities. So in this instance, especially if I'm traveling in the winter, I know that there could be a snowstorm that comes up, and it's just a variable. You don't know if the airline's going to be very sympathetic that you missed your connecting flight because of another flight that you had booked. Lots of times they might be really awesome about it and be able to rebook you without any big fees, or maybe you can tell them ahead of time and let them know and they can coordinate it all really great. Sometimes they might be more difficult. As you can imagine, this is going to be easier to sort out if you're in a country where you speak the language, and also if you're in the US. The US, far and away from anywhere I've ever been, has the best customer service, and it's because the consumers are a big pain in the ass. Pardon my language. They demand it. It's really the expectation that they are offering great customer service, and sometimes overseas that's not always the case. So just be aware of that. Probably my rule of thumb, and usually what I'm comfortable with, is I'm very comfortable flying out of a different origin city in the U.S., but I probably want to actually fly into the city that I'm going to internationally, unless I want to maybe, for Europe, some of the big airports would be Paris, Milan, Amsterdam, London. If I'm going to fly into London, I'm probably not just going to catch another flight to my end destination. Maybe I decide I'll just add a couple days in London onto the trip. So anyway, just things to think about. But getting back to the actual flight searching nature, if I look up Chicago to Paris and I pull up the price calculator, pardon me, I'm just having a bit of a cold. Now you can see, I don't know if you remember as I was looking for February from Minneapolis, but I believe the prices were all in the, they were all pretty high. So if I really knew I wanted to travel in February, and that looks like February 1st to 12th, or I could look at the 27th. That's only $361. So I think my prices that I was seeing when I was looking at a Minneapolis were probably in the $600, $700 range. This very well might be worth it. Again, you want to click in. This looks like a fantastic deal. It is, oh, that's not the one. See? they do this thing. They do best departing flights and then other. This is definitely an other. And you can see here it does have an overnight stop in Reykjavik. So in addition to my extra flight to Chicago that I'm going to have to book, I would either have to be willing to sleep in the airport, which I am not, or go into Reykjavik and have an overnight. And I know personally it's a lovely city. I'd highly recommend seeing it, but it's also really expensive, even just for overnight. So that might not be worth it. Not the best example to show here, but just you get the idea. The more flexible you can be, the more you can sometimes save money. Again, if we're looking at it out of New York, same thing. We're seeing some really low flights. Look at this, $278. That is incredible. This is round trip. Round trip, $278, a non-stop from Newark to Orly Airport for $278. I don't know what the round trip, what the tickets to New York, to and from New York from Minneapolis are going for, but that's something that I would definitely consider purchasing or exploring. If you are an anxious traveler, if you really freak out when things don't go smoothly, I might not recommend this. The extra money you save might not be worth the extra anxiety that it's going to cause you. So know thyself and book accordingly. When I will tell you always to use one-way tickets is if you have multi-city stops. So here's the reason. When flight engines compile recommendations for you, generally they're going to try to stay with the same airline usually. And even when you see that they've kind of compiled it together and it's different airlines, lots of times maybe they have an affiliation. It just seems like they're not really doing the best of optimizing the cheapest options that you could do and putting it together, because the airline has to be offering it as a package deal. So when you book 2 one-way tickets, maybe one airline has a super cheap flight for you going over there and another has a super cheap flight for you coming back. And if you were booking it as a round trip, the search engine wouldn't necessarily put that together. It's particularly true if you're looking at multi-city, where if you're booking a trip over to Europe, you know you're going to start in Rome, you want to go down to Barcelona, and then you want to head to Rome. Sorry, you're booking a trip to Rome, you want to head to Barcelona, and then you want to maybe finish up in Paris. First of all, do not take the train for those cities. For sure you're going to fly. And then you would, and I don't know that I would, anyway, we'll talk about vacation planning later, but that's not a particularly inspired itinerary that I would recommend, just because all those destinations are cities that you'd really want to explore in depth, and they're kind of far away from one another. So, but let's say you wanted to, you would not use the multi-city, you would book different one-way tickets from A to B to C to D, because then you're really leveraging all these different airlines. And that is basically my 101 on my general philosophy and parameters around doing an online flight search, leveraging Google Flights, and how you can save money. There's another really cool tool. So going back to the example that I just said, maybe you're planning a trip, you know you want to start in Rome, and then you're kind of open to where else you might be able to go to. Or particularly if you're going to be abroad for a while. Like I said, when I go over there, I like to go over there for a whole month or so. And it's sometimes you have a weekend that you'd like to fill, and you know you are open to pretty much whatever. You just want to find a cheap option. So let's say I will be based out of Paris, and I'm open to anywhere. And if we look at the dates that I was talking about, we're going to go into April. And let's say it's this weekend. I'm going to leave on a Thursday, come back to Paris that following Tuesday. Or, you know, if I've just bought a one-way ticket to Paris, which I sometimes will do, much to my mother's consternation when I can go over there without a return date, maybe I'll just look at a one-way option here. But the moral of the story, the results here will be the same. You can see it for that particular weekend. Those dates, you can see some of my options. So going to Milan, it would be $51. Spain, I could head to Girona. So what I love about this everywhere option is that I would have never thought to go to Girona. I maybe would have thought about Milan. It's not one of your mainstay cities in Italy. It's not Rome, Venice or Florence. But I really love that you have the chance to go to some of these cities that you may never have considered before. Looks like it's a lovely beach destination. It sounds super fun. And it can really open your eyes to some options that you would not have thought about otherwise. Hamburg's another one. I maybe wouldn't have thought to go there. So that is the Skyscanner Everywhere option. Again, you just type in what it's a really good option for is if you know dates that you would like to travel, but you aren't particular necessarily about your destination, or you just want to do a wide open search and see what's kind of cheap and have a fun adventure. So that's all. That's as simple as it is. There are a lot more flight engines out there. I know people have different preferences. Some people like kayak. Some people like all kinds of different things. Skyscanner has, other than beyond their everywhere feature, they do have a lot of other. You can use it just like I was using Google. I'm just going to show you just for a sec of how it's a little different. If we go back to my initial flight search, Minneapolis to Paris, it was a departure on the 1st, to return on the 2nd. So you can see here, I'm not seeing prices show up. I'm actually having to click into a date, and then I'm seeing prices come up. And it's searching for flights, searching. So if you recall, Iceland Air was the cheapest at $545, and it looks like $543, and it does look like they have a cheaper option for that same flight. And they've got a Delta option here as well. So this is, I opened it up to show a particular example to see if these types of companies would come up, and they are. I'll show you what I mean in just a second when it stops searching. I will say too, what I will do with Google Flights is I'll use it as a starting point. Anytime you decide on the flight that you want to take, it's never a bad idea to plug it into multiple search engines and just see what they come back to you with. So before I click into this, I'm going to take a little bet. I'm going to bet this flight is not actually through Delta. So yes, the carrier is through Delta, but I'm going to guess that a third party is the one marketing this flight for that price. Because if we look at the corresponding Google search, just a second. Yeah. So if we look at that corresponding Google search, this is probably what it is. 412, yeah. $611 is what they're saying. It's really tempting because it is nonstop. That looks like a fantastic option. $541. That looks absolutely delightful. I'm going to give up. It does look like it's through Delta, so I was wrong about that. What I was going to show, see, this is just a stand-up tutorial. This is what you get, but honestly, who knows what I was going to see. I guess it makes it more fun and organic. It does appear to be through Delta, which is good to know. This is a super slimmed down ticket. So this didn't show up in Google this way because I can't choose my advanced seat selection. It does at least have a carry-on bag, so that's good. Sometimes it'll just be a personal item. It can show you that too. So it's super cheap because it's just a slimmed down option. So Google just is saying you're not going to want to do that. And honestly, for a transatlantic flight, there's no way on earth I'm not picking my seat. I will pay pretty much whatever to be able to pick my seat. Most flights start in the evening, and then it's an overnight flight, so you're going to have bad sleep. So you're basically counting on your normal 8 hours of sleep on an airplane. You're going to arrive there sometime early the next morning, so it's already not going to be great sleep. I always get a window seat so that I can lean my head up against it and get as good of a good night's sleep as I could possibly get. So in this case, I'm for sure not going to do it. Gosh, that $611 does look tempting though, for it to be a non-stop flight and just not having to deal with a layover. So you can see that this is the column that was best, but when I was looking earlier, you saw that some options came up that were like $510 that were cheapest. I am going to select this, and you can see it says 7 deals from. So this means these deals are not coming from Lufthansa, they're not coming from Brussels Airlines, these are coming from third-party sellers like Explore Trip, Vayama, Cheapo Air. They're sometimes a good option. They're sometimes a not great option, because if you need to make any changes, if you need to, I think what they're doing is they're buying the tickets and then they're remarketing them. I'm not certain on how they get it to be cheaper than the general airlines, but for one, this is a bit. Oh no, it's just 1 layover, and it's actually good travel times. So it looks really appealing. Sometimes you can't choose your seats. You have to actually call through the airlines and you have to pay extra money to choose your seats. But I might consider doing this. It looks to be a fairly good option. I've got a relatively short layover at Washington, but I might actually consider doing this one. Anytime you're going through something with Explore Trip, just know that the airline, it's not their obligation to stand behind it. Now, you're not going to be just out of luck and not have a ticket at all, but anytime you need to make a change, anytime you need to call customer service or anything like that, it's not really, you're not calling the airline's customer service. You're probably going to start with this company's, if they even, they do have a phone number. If they even have a phone number, some of them don't. And if there are any issues with it, if you need to make any changes and you do have to call Lufthansa or do need to coordinate it through Lufthansa, you're really going to end up being charged quite a bit more. I liken it to when you book a hotel through Priceline versus booking it through the hotel itself. You're actually paying Priceline and then Priceline's paying the hotel. This is something similar for flights. So it's not to say it's a bad option. Sometimes the price difference is really significant, and so I'll end up doing it. Right here, it's $509 versus $543 if I just book right through Iceland Air from Google Flights. I'm just going to book right through Iceland Air because then it's just in one place. It's nice and simple. For me, it's worth the extra $30-some. So that is the end of this tutorial. It got a little longer than I wanted to, but I did want to say, if you have questions, please write them in the comment section below. You can always also email me at carissa_myers@hotmail.com. I'll put my email address in the link below too, because I love helping people to find and discover a love for travel, and lots of times cost can be a big barrier to that. So I love helping people find their perfect destination, kind of craft a perfect vacation for them and their risk averseness or risk-taking level, and just kind of something that they're comfortable in and that they can really enjoy, that has the right amount of adventure, relaxing that they're looking for, and helping them to do it affordably. So with that, I will leave you be and hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.